Hello and welcome to the Baggies Podcast YouTube channel. Hope you're all doing well. Today it's a bit of a different video, not one that I've even attempted to do before, but this is ranking West Bromwich Albion's Premier League current squad. Basically, I'm going to be using a tier list, which if you don't know what a tier list is, basically you just put things in tiers and decide what's better than what and put it in different categories to whatever your opinion happens to be. Today we're doing that with the West Brom squad. It's a 30-man Albion squad and I'm going to be ranking them into different tiers, but I'll explain more about that in a minute. But however, if you're new around here, make sure you subscribe to the Baggies Podcast YouTube channel. We're on the road to 1,000 subscribers. We're nearly at 300. We're nearly a third of the way there. So if we can keep going with this, I'd be really, really grateful, and hopefully we can start on this fantastic journey together. But if you haven't listened to this week's actual episode of the Baggies Podcast, you can check that out via YouTube or at other podcast platforms. Obviously, they're available wherever you're listening to your podcasts. I had the Baggy brothers on this week. We were very ecstatic after a fantastic victory against Chelsea. Hopefully, if that's something you're interested in, make sure you go and check it out. But on to today's video, which is going to be all about ranking West Bromwich Albion's 30-man Premier League squad. It's going to be a pretty interesting one, so make sure you stick around to the end because there's some interesting choices as to where I've ranked the Albion players. Let's get straight into this video. So the tier list that I've gone with 4 different categories for these players. Each individual player will be put into a category depending on their ability over I think it's the past season or so I've based this on, so anything before that I'm not counting. Basically it's just sort of their recent ability of what I've seen from these Albion players. Basically, you've got at the top, you've got your nice little PL quality. You can see the little diagram here. So you've got your PL quality, which is your Premier League quality players, which are the players that are your best in your squad, in my opinion, and the ones that you really want to keep around if you're playing in the Premier League. Then, a step down from that, we're going into the orange tier, and that is your yellow tier, I think it is, and that is your Championship quality players. So if we're going down to the Championship, I'd probably play these players quite often. Then you've got, in the orange tier, you've got your bench players, which are, do they really get into the Premier League squad? No. Do they really get into the Championship squad? Are they worthy of keeping around? Yeah. And then I've gone with poor at the bottom, which probably is a bit harsh. So maybe not poor, but sort of I wouldn't play them. Maybe they're getting on a bit like most of these players are, or maybe they're just not good enough for the level that we want to be at. So that's the sort of tier system we've got. As you can see, we've got all the players ready in that inventory to just pop into those tiers when we need be. We'll be sort of sticking them into the tiers. Of course, if you're new around here, make sure to subscribe. But if you disagree with any of my things or agree with them, make sure to drop your comments down in the comments below, because I'd really love to hear what you guys think about where I've put certain players. It'd be quite interesting to hear some different opinions. So make sure you go and do that if you fancy. So make sure you go and do that in the comment section below. So let's dive straight in. We're going to start with the goalkeepers. I think we're not going to go positionally all the way, but let's get the goalkeepers out of the way. I've gone with the 2 goalkeepers that we've used sort of over the past couple of seasons, and that is David Button, and he will personally go on my bench, in my bench category. I wouldn't start him in the Championship. I probably wouldn't start him in the Premier League, but he's sort of that player. He's your backup goalie, basically. He's your perfect idea of a backup goalie. Then Sam Johnston, I think if I put him anywhere other than Premier League category, I'd just be wrong. He's been fantastic this season. He's been absolutely phenomenal, and he's a player that I want to keep around for the foreseeable future. Not sure whether he will, but he's certainly a player that I'd want to keep around. So Sam Johnston, your Premier League quality, son, and you should be playing for England. We're next going to go for Branislav Ivanovic, who I feel it's not really his fault where he's going, but he's going in poor. He's going in that sort of place where I wouldn't start him. He's really an emergency backup, if anything. I wouldn't really start him, unfortunately. Sorry, Branislav. I know you've had a great career, but this Albion team is probably just a step above what you should be playing at this sort of stage in your career. Sorry, Branislav. I do apologise, mate. Next, we're going for Dara O'Shea, who sits in... It's really hard because I feel like he deserves a spot in that PL quality, but there's been times where he's shown Championship quality and PL quality. But I think the Championship quality for me is a fair place to put him. He's going to be a Premier League quality player. If we go down to the Championship, he's one of my first choice centre-back. Well, he probably is my first choice centre-back, depending on who stays and who goes. So Dara O'Shea, for me, is sticking in Championship quality. But he's top-end Championship for me. I think he's really matured as a player, and I think he's going to be a great player for us. Kieran Gibbs is going in poor. Sorry, Kieran, he's not been up to it this season. I know he's been a great servant to the club for us. I'm not going to forget everything he's done for us, but he's not been my type of player this season. He's not really been the same player that he has been. Next, we're going for Carlin Grant. Is a player that we bought in on quite a hefty price tag, quite a big price tag surrounding him. I've gone for a big fat championship level category for Carlin Grant. He's a decent player, going to do very well in the championship if we do go down. Not quite ready for Premier League action in our team at the moment, but I could stand corrected on that if he comes and keeps us up in the Premier League. But yeah, Carlin Grant sits championship category for me. Now, going on to Cedric Kipray, a player I haven't seen too much about, but I have seen him at Wigan, his previous club, and he had an absolute masterclass for me. He either sticks in the bench or he goes in the championship quality, but I'd perhaps start him in the championship. I think he'd be a really useful player and a very good defender, obviously on loan at Charleroi in Belgium. I'm going to stick him in the championship quality section. Next up, let's go for Kamil Grosicki. He's a player who I want to see a bit more of because I don't think I've seen enough of him. I wouldn't necessarily start him in the Championship, and I wouldn't necessarily start him in the Premier League. So, but that means he goes on my bench. He's that bench player. I think he's a really good squad player. Maybe not for the wage he's on, to be quite honest, but he's a bench player all round for me, Kamil Grosicki, unfortunately. Next, on to Connor Townsend. I think he's a Premier League player. You know, I think he's the second Premier League player on this list so far. I think he's really come on leaps and bounds. I think we don't need to be worried. Well, we do need to be worried about Johnston and Pereira leaving. We need to be worried about Connor Townsend leaving because I think he's going to be a player that teams might take a little punt on. But so yeah, Connor Townsend, you've really improved yourself. Congratulations, mate. You're going in PL quality. Next, on to Rakeem Harper. He's a youngster. We've seen a bit of him over the past couple of years. Currently on loan at Birmingham. I think he's a good player, but would he start for me in the Championship? Probably not. Would he start for me in the Premier League? Definitely not. So he goes on the bench for me, but however, I think he's got Premier League quality in him at some point in his career, whether that be in the next 3 or 4 years, whether that be for Albion or not. I think Rakeem Harper has got it somewhere inside him. Jake Livermore, our club captain, not quite been good enough for the Premier League this year. I think a lot of people would probably agree with me on that. He goes in Championship quality for me. I think he's definitely good enough to start in the Championship if you play him in that right system. If you start getting him to spray balls across the pitch, that's not what he's good at. He's good at tackling. He's good at perhaps sort of he's sort of like a box-to-box midfielder in that sort of sense, sort of that just ball-winning midfielder. He just runs around and does all the tackling for you. But Livermore, you're a good captain in my opinion. I think you need to go in the Championship section of the tier list. Next, on to Robson Carney, a player who I've liked over the years playing for Albion, but this season and perhaps over last season, I just don't think. Well, maybe not last season. He did well last season, but this season, I think the Premier League at his age and at his stage in his career is probably a step up. I wouldn't put him on the bench necessarily if we went down. In fact, I'd probably put him in poor and I wouldn't play him whatsoever. I'm sorry, Hal. Your goal at Euro 2016 was something to behold, but unfortunately, you're going in the poor section for now. Carl Bartley. You're a player. If you'd have asked me this question and you've asked me to do this, if you'd have asked me to do this tier list at the beginning of the season, I'd have said, maybe he's a bench player. Maybe just about Championship quality. But he's come on leaps and bounds under Sam Allardyce. And he's proved himself as a Premier League quality player this season. I mean, there's no other way I can describe him at the moment. I think he's been a Premier League quality player. I'm sorry, Carl Bartley, you're going in Premier League quality. I don't think we'll lose him. But I think he's really come on leaps and bounds under Allardyce. And that's why he goes in PL quality for me. Romain Sawyers, a man who gets a lot of pelters, gets a lot of criticism. For me, he's Championship quality. I mean, he's not Premier League quality. I wouldn't be playing him on the bench in the Championship. In the right system, if he's playing a more advanced role, he's a Championship quality player. He's not built for defensive midfield duties. I'm not a massive fan of him in that position. He hasn't done well at all. He's been rubbish, in fact. But if you play him more advanced, I think he's a Championship quality player. Romain Sawyers, if we go down, I want to see you getting more into those advanced playmaking positions. Carl Edwards. He goes on the bench for me, whatever division we're in. I haven't seen enough of him to deserve a start. I think Championship quality, he could potentially push up to there. But Carl Edwards, you sit on the bench for me. I think you've got it in you somewhere to be a Championship, potentially Premier League quality player if you work on it. If he works on his end product, I think bench player for Carl Edwards. I think he could be very vital with his pace coming off the bench. Kenneth Zohore, a player who's not played Premier League football, not played football for West Bromwich Albion competitively this season, unlike most of the players on this list. He goes in poor for me. I think Not for any fault of his own. I think the 8 million price tag has probably annoyed most people, and that's probably heightened their expectations. And what they've got with Kenneth has not been good enough. Kenneth's a whore. You go in and poor. Sammy Field, you won't be with us at the end of the season, and neither will the person I'm going to talk about next. But Sam Field, your championship quality for me. I've wanted to see you play in Albion colours for so long, and the way that you played when you have been there has proved to me that you should be playing championship or above. I'd have loved to see more of him this season, but obviously that's not going to be the case, and we may never see him again in an Albion shirt. But for me, he's top class. Charlie Austin. He goes on the bench for me. I think QPR have done a good thing by taking him off at our hands, and he's obviously back home where he did so well for in the Premier League and Championship. For me, Austin goes on the bench at this stage in his career for Albion, considering the attacking options we have. I think he's a good player, and I think he was a fantastic player, but I think now I don't think he's quite good enough to start in Championship or Premier League for Albion. Next up, it's Lee Peltier, and he sits in the poor section for me. I'm sorry, Lee. You've probably provided quite a lot of valuable experience in that dressing room, but for me, you've done a really good job inside the dressing room, but not such a good job outside the dressing room. It's probably a step too far. I'm not really sure why we signed him, to be honest, but he's done an all right job when he's come in, but he's not a starter. Might not even have him on the bench in the Premier League or Championship, if I'm honest. Peltier, you're going in poor, unfortunately, but you might go on the bench. I think that's probably a worthy thing to say. He probably should be on the bench, maybe, at times. Robert Snodgrass, bench for me. I think he might be good enough for Championship level. We haven't seen enough of him yet in an Albion shirt, and he probably would be. But for me, he goes in bench. I think he's a good player. He's got set piece ability, so if he comes off the bench, he could take a corner and win you the game. This is sort of a similar situation with Matt Phillips, who I'm going to go on to now. He sort of sits in that Championship to bench category like Snodgrass does. I'm going to say Championship for Phillips just simply because he's a fantastic, I'd say good servant to the club, I think. He's been here the longest, probably out of most of these players, unless they're academy products. But Phillips sits in Championship, Snodgrass sits on the bench for me. Darnell Furlong, I wanted to put him in Premier League quality because I think his attacking output is good enough to be Premier League quality. However, I just think, would he get into other Premier League sides? I might not say yes. However, would he get into every Championship side? I think yes, apart from maybe Norwich or somebody like that. I think he gets into most Championship sides, but not every Premier Leagues, not most Premier League sides. So I think he sits in Championship quality for me. However, much improved this season, and I've really loved watching him. Okay, Yokushlu. He's poor, he's rubbish. Yokushlu, awful. No, he's going in Premier League quality. He's probably even higher than that. He's better than Premier League quality. He's actually Champions League quality. No, not maybe not that. He's European football worthy. Europa League or not, I think Yokushlu is Premier League quality by a long shot. Ainsley Maitland-Niles, he's Premier League quality. I think he's shown enough for me to be sort of that lower end of the Premier League, lower table, but he needs to be in a team that plays football, and I don't think he's in one at the moment, unfortunately. So, Maitland-Niles, you're going in Premier League quality. Dean Garner, a player that sort of is he splits opinion. I think this season he's been champion. He's only shown me Championship quality since joining the club, so I'm going to say Championship quality. He's only shown me that he can do it in the Championship. He's shown me in the Premier League for one game against Everton where he did that fantastic run and goal, but unfortunately he's going Championship quality. Grady, I want to see you playing an Albion shirt again, trust me, but at the moment you're Championship quality. Callum Robinson. Some would say before the season, who are you starting, Grady or Robbo? I'd probably say Grady. I think most of you guys would as well. But Robbo, for me, has been Premier League quality this season. He's come up with some goals, especially last week against Chelsea. He's certainly come up with the goods. Conor Gallagher is certainly going in Premier League quality. He's shown me the grit and determination to show me that he could be a low bottom half of the Premier League player at the moment, but could potentially improve to be better than that. I don't think he's quite going to get into Chelsea's squad next season, but I certainly think that he's got plenty going on for him. Semi Ajayi. It's a difficult one because I say he gets into literally every Championship side I can think of, but does he get into every Premier League side? I think he gets into quite a few in the bottom half. I think maybe 5 or 6 of the bottom half. For that reason, I think he goes for Premier League quality for me. I think we're slightly in danger of him getting poached at the end of the season, simply just because of the the pace that he has at the back. I think a lot of teams potentially lack that pace at the back in centre-back positions, and that's why I think Ajayi in danger of potentially leaving us. Don't leave, Semi. We need you. We want you in the Championship or Premier League, wherever we are. Mbaye Diagne is the next player I'm going to talk about. His finishing is poor. He goes in the bottom category. But his link-up play is essential to what Albion are trying to do, especially what we did against Chelsea. I think he sits in that PL quality band for that. He either sits there or Championship quality. He's poor for finishing, but everything else, he's essential to what West Brom do in our attacking output. He's linking up the play and he's making things much better for our attacking players and giving us the movement that we need. So for me, Diagne, your Premier League quality, I think that's probably debatable. Please leave your comments down below, but I think he sits in Premier League quality for me. Mateus Pereira, he should be playing League 2 football, not Premier League. No, he's going in PL quality for me. I think he's definitely worth sticking in that PL quality bracket. I think we're in real danger of losing him this summer, especially if we slap 17 million on for him. He should be not 70. I think it's perhaps a bit of a stretch. 30 million for Pereira for me. I think he's shown it this season. But yeah, that is the final member of the tier list. Here's how it's looking at the moment. Obviously, you've been seeing it as it's going along, but that is the full thing. Let me know who you disagree with, because I'd like to see that, because obviously different players are going to have different opinions for each person who's watching this video. So make sure you drop your opinions on whoever you think sits in that sort of category below in the comments. But that is the tier list that I have made up for this Albion squad, the current 30-man Albion squad. But that brings us to the end of this video. I'd like to say a massive thank you for joining me for this video. Hopefully you've enjoyed it, and hopefully you've enjoyed hearing my opinions and my tier list and watching the different graphics come up, because that's something I've been working on. Make sure you drop a like on the video, make sure you're subscribing, turn your notification bell on, and drop a comment if you disagree, agree with them. If there's anyone I've made you grind your gears about, drop a comment down below. I'm all ears. I'd love to hear what you think. Make sure you subscribe. We're on the road to 1,000 subscribers. It's beneficial that you subscribe. It's essential that you subscribe. But yeah, until then, make sure you check out the latest podcast, and make sure you look out for next week's podcast by turning on your notification bell and following me on Twitter at thebaggiespodcast or at @LouisBent_. But until next time, I'll see you in the next one. Bye-bye.